This week, a project geared at providing more affordable housing for farm workers in Half Moon Bay took a long-awaited step forward. Ann Makovec joins me now with where things stand right now. Hey, Ann.
Yeah, Liz, this is a housing project for low-income seniors. The Half Moon Bay Planning Commission approved it earlier this week. The decision came after 5 hours of deliberation and over a week after Governor Newsom threatened them with legal action for not moving quickly enough. The plan now goes to the full city council for final approval. The proposed 5-story, 40-unit project would be built in downtown Half Moon Bay. That's on Kelly Avenue. And some critics and commissioners said it doesn't align with Half Moon Bay's small-town charm. This week's decision came 16 months after the deadly mass shooting at 2 mushroom farms that exposed the poor living conditions of farm workers in the coastal city. Photos that came to light after the shooting showed some farm workers being housed in storage sheds with no running water, others in shacks and flimsy trailers, which have since been condemned. This new project is slightly smaller than the previous proposal. Developers also agreeing to reduce the number of 2-bedroom units in the building, and that left supporters frustrated that it wasn't meeting the needs of farm workers. Critics still worried about the size of that project.
It's just getting railroaded and passed through because of the urgency and because of what happened here a year and a half ago. And what they're proposing on that piece of land there, I think, is too big.
There's always been a problem with getting stuff done in this town. Money, politics. Some of the locals have told me that they're concerned about parking and traffic and noise and this and that. But, you know, you get that everywhere. I don't think it's a problem.
Now, even after approving the plan, commissioners advised the city council to go back to the original plan of 4 stories and further minimize the offices planned on the first floor. Another project for low-income farm workers, including families displaced by the shooting, is set to break ground later this year. Liz.
Ann, thank you. Well, still ahead, I got a chance to talk to State Senator Becker about the latest developments on this housing project and why he is hopeful this is just the start. Plus, why the mayor of Half Moon Bay is prioritizing farm worker housing, and he says it's personal. This afternoon, we're focusing on the efforts to make affordable housing more available for senior farm workers in Half Moon Bay. The need has been in the spotlights ever since the shootings at the 2 farms last year exposed the poor conditions many farm workers are living in right now. Joining me today is State Senator Josh Becker, who represents much of San Mateo County. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, first, let's get your reaction to the latest approval from the Planning Commission and the recommended changes that they're hoping for.
Well, this is great news. It was a lot of work by a lot of people and a bit of a long time in coming, but everyone came together to support this project, which will be many, many units for farm workers, even senior farm workers. And as you mentioned, these are people who have been working in our community for, in some cases, decades, essential workers working through the pandemic, and now many of them will have a nice place to call home.
Let's talk about the desperate need for this type of housing, though, for this group of people who are an integral part of the Half Moon Bay community.
The pandemic exposed some of this, but really it was the shooting that exposed the really dire living conditions of many farm workers in our community. And not many people always remembered that there is still a very vibrant agricultural community on the San Mateo County coast, thousands of farm workers. And again, we all got a view into the really, really difficult living conditions.
What are the next steps in the process, and what's the kind of ideal timeline? When do you hope that this location will be done?
Well, again, I'm very proud of this. I fought along with Assemblymember Mark Berman. We both fought for money at the state level, specifically for Half Moon Bay, and some specifically for this project. So it's great news. It's going forward. The Planning Commission has now approved it, and so now it's going to go to the City Council as the next step. If the City Council approves it, we're off and running.
So there has been some resistance to this project, especially some reservations about the size and the scope of where it's located. Do you think after this Planning Commission said yes to this project, are there other projects in the works? Does this sort of open the door for more affordable housing in Half Moon Bay?
Well, there were already a couple of very specific farm worker projects that were already moving along. One with modular units that's going to be produced very quickly. And so and there's another big plot of land that we're looking at, the county is looking at purchasing, and the county's been a great actor in all of this. So yeah, there's a number of other things moving forward. And again, some of the concerns raised are legitimate things that you have to consider for any project. But this also was, sometimes there's just a component where people maybe worry a little too much about size and certain things that once it's actually built, I think everyone's going to love this project. It's really a beautiful project.
The mayor of Half Moon Bay says improving farm worker housing is one of his main priorities because he knows the key role farm workers play in that community and others. Our Max Darrow caught up with him as he took the post this year as the city's first Mexican immigrant mayor.
Take a walk with Joaquin Jimenez Ureña, and chances are you'll have to stop a few times along the way.
How you doing? Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations are still in order for Jimenez, as he is the first Mexican immigrant to become mayor
El alcalde
of Half Moon Bay.
It is an honor, definitely, to represent Half Moon Bay.
Jimenez immigrated from Mexico to Half Moon Bay when he was 13.
This is the block where I grew up.
His parents were farm workers here. They lived in a home near the corner of Johnston and Miramontes.
So these are the two first families in Half Moon Bay.
He's become somewhat of a Half Moon Bay historian over the course of his 37 years here.
I love Half Moon Bay. I love the community.
The unique coastal city is home to around 12,000 people. About a third of that population is Latino. Now, aside from the picturesque views that you get of the California coast here, you'll also find a lot of farms here. That's because Half Moon Bay was originally an agricultural outpost.
We are a farming community. That's our heritage.
And keeping that intact, says the mayor, is a must. But like many California cities, affordability in Half Moon Bay is a challenge, here especially for many of the farm workers.
If we don't give them a decent place for them to stay, to live, they're going to move out. If we lose our farming, what's going to be our Half Moon Bay?
Improving farm worker housing has been a priority for Jimenez for a while, but it became a major priority for the city and the state after tragedy struck last year, when a gunman went on a shooting spree and murdered 7 people at 2 Half Moon Bay farms. The world saw the dire conditions that many farm workers were living in, a reality Jimenez hopes to change.
I want to see our first farm workers moving into farm worker housing, into a decent farm worker housing, something that any of us could actually move into. It is very realistic.
Another priority, continue to be an approachable leader, which is why you'll find him taking daily walks through town or often riding on horseback downtown. Although he's proud to give Latinos representation, he's honored to represent everyone of Half Moon Bay.
I will stop and have a conversation with anybody in our community.
He hopes to inspire a future generation of leaders as well.
I'm very interested in having our young adults becoming more involved in our city. Help us make decisions. Help us see what we don't see.
Turning back the clock, becoming the mayor wasn't something Jimenez saw in his future. It was something neither he nor others thought was possible.
Feels really good. That's my office.
So he has no plans to take that opportunity and responsibility for granted.
What a story, right? Well, Jimenez became the first Mexican immigrant to serve on Half Moon Bay City Council back in 2021. Half Moon Bay chooses one of its 5 council members to serve as mayor each year on a rotating basis. Another community figure has been providing much needed support to the farm worker community for years. We first introduced you to her back in 2020 when she won a Bay Area Jefferson Award. Sharon Chin updates us on the woman many farm workers call an angel.
Oh, ya ves. Dr. Belinda Hernandez Arriaga shines a bright light in a time of unimaginable grief.
There's been so many miracles that we've seen. There's so many threads of love.
Belinda and her nonprofit Alas leaped into action after a deadly shooting spree at 2 coastal mushroom farms a year ago in a case of suspected workplace violence. Belinda and her team knew most of the victims and their families, and they've led the way in supporting the farm worker community.
It feels shorter than a year. It feels like it just happened. And so for us and for so many and for the victims, the emotions are still very fresh in our hearts.
Belinda and Alas are rays of comfort from their home base, a sunshine-colored house that a donor bought for the nonprofit the first pandemic summer of 2020. Today, they're serving twice as many people, 2,000 a week. Not only with the basics from food to healthcare and education, but with mental health counseling. The need has doubled after the shooting. So Belinda and Alas launched new art and music therapy programs that help people walk and talk through their trauma in shared cultural experiences.
We have to be there to, think about how do we heal together, collectively.
For example, participants performed for an audience of hundreds over the holidays. They showcased what they'd learned in accordion lessons they'd taken for music therapy.
California vine contratado a piscar esperado.
Belinda also provides a space for self-expression, where Sinoki Martinez can share songs he's written about his long life as a farm worker. Sinoki's music helped a recent audience feel they are not alone in their struggles.
As a cultural healer singing, people were crying when he sang that night.
For Belinda, a licensed mental health clinician, embracing the coastside farm worker community brings her healing as well.
That collective strength, the care, and my personal faith has helped us to say, we will get through this one day at a time.
One day, one hug at a time.
A study from UC Merced shows between 1/3 and 1/2 of farm workers reported having at least one chronic condition, and 49% are without health insurance. The study also says 14% reported feeling depressed or hopeless. Well, still ahead, more support for farm workers while they're out on the job. The effort by Bay Area high school students. This afternoon, we're focusing on the challenges facing our Bay Area farm workers and the community members providing much needed support. About a year ago, we told you about some high school students from Concord who teamed up to focus on solutions for farm workers in their community. They hand-built a rest station, a place where farm workers can take their breaks. It includes things like an umbrella for shade and charging stations.
Es algo que necesitan. Pues yo creo que en todos los ranchos de aquí de la zona algo para que tengan donde guardar sus pertenencias, donde acudir a tomar agua, suero para hidratarse, un descanso cuando está la calor fuerte, ¿no?
Yeah. Now, the students said their goal is to expand the work beyond Contra Costa County. An organization in the community of Byron helped the children of farm workers get the supplies they needed ahead of this school year. The nonprofit Hijas del Campo stopped by a farm to drop off items like backpacks, notebooks, and highlighters. Jeanette Pena works with the group and says she knows what this means for farm worker families since she herself used to work in the fields with her mom.
Tal vez no son grandes cosas, pero como para una persona que trabaja en el campo sí lo es, porque pues con el mínimo que se gana sí es mucho la ayuda que les dan.
She went on to say she thinks these efforts motivate students to continue studying after high school and take advantage of opportunities their parents may not have had. And other efforts to support and celebrate farm workers are happening elsewhere in our state as well. This is video from Farmchella in Coachella, that's in Riverside County. This happened last month. Farmchella is a festival featuring local produce and live music. There was also free medical services for farm workers, things like blood pressure checks and information about heat-related illnesses.
And a lot of people, when they come to, the Coachella Festival, they say, well, it's so hot, it's so dusty. And then they fail to acknowledge that, hey, farm workers work in these conditions every single day. And yet, what are we doing for them when they're feeding all of us?
This year's Farmchella saw almost double the amount of sponsors and vendors compared to last year's event. We'll be right back. Thank you you so much for joining us for today's conversation about farm worker housing in Half Moon Bay. We'd love to hear what you think and what's going on in your communities. Post your thoughts online using the hashtag KPIX. CBS Evening News is next. Local news continues on our streaming service, CBS News Bay Area. I'll see you at 5.
Thanks for watching. You can get the latest headlines and weather over on Pix Plus. And remember to like and click the button on the bottom left of your screen to subscribe for the biggest Bay Area news.